So now we're going to go to. So what happened? I was inspired because somebody on Facebook sent a message to me and said, are all progressives in the U.S. pro-Russia and pro-Putin? And I started to write a response, and I guess it triggered me in a way, So rather than just respond to this person via DM, which is what I did do, I then copied that DM and response and pasted it into a Substack and built upon it, expanded upon it a little bit. And next thing you knew, it started to turn into an article. And I sent a copy of it to our friend, the Dissident, and he decided to append it. He's like, this is really good stuff. And I'm like, I was going to add this link and this link and link in this. He's like, I can add some stuff in there too. And next thing you know, we had a co-written article published by the Dissident, and go follow the Dissident. It's the 307.substack.com, at leftist_news12 on Twitter. Definitely hook him up. And now he's got a Patreon, so definitely you can hook him up with some weed money if he smokes. I think he does. Anyway, IndieNews.Network, and of course me, Indy, we publish this together. So before we do that, I just want to refresh one thing here, which is the Twidget thing here.
I have to admit, it's a very well written article.
Well, thank you.
But we might have a few differences.
You can disagree. You can disagree with me, and that's good. That's what we want to have that conversation about. Okay, now I'm able to put this back up on screen, but for some reason it's not continuing to scroll with the chat. So, So my answer here is to this person who asked about, are we pro-Russia and pro-Putin? The answer is that we are not pro-Putin. We are anti-war. Okay, and of course Putin did invade, but there are reasons for doing that. And again, this is where I was writing this as a response, and then this was appended and enhanced. So this is also the Dissident's words, but I'm gonna straight up read it out. We don't see Russia as any more guilty than the U.S., who helped create this problem in the first place, trying to be the world's policeman when we can't take care of our own. We're opposed to sending billions of dollars to the Azov Battalion, a Nazi militia that's officially part of the Ukrainians' National Guard. This happened after Joe Biden helped install a far-right puppet government in 2014 with Victoria Nuland and company. As the BBC reported at the time, the far-right nationalist group Right Sector played a major role in the Maidan coup. A now-deleted article in Foreign Policy magazine, dug up by Aaron Mate, said that the uncomfortable truth is that a sizable portion of Kiev's current government and the protesters who brought it to power are indeed fascists. These far-right forces were funded by the U.S. government's cutout USAID. This coup also led to a bloody civil war between the Ukrainian government and Russian-backed separatists, where 80% of civilian casualties occurred on the rebels' separatist side, according to the United Nations. This is, of course, not justification, like we said, for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is illegal and has killed innocent civilians and has caused 3 million people to flee the country. This is simply an analysis of the well-documented events being ignored in the mainstream media that led to the current invasion and crisis that we're witnessing. So, after the overthrow in 2014 of the Yanukovych government, audio was released that showed them that then Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland handpicking the politicians that would make up the new Ukrainian government. Because of this, many in the Obama administration used this new puppet government for their own personal gain. How do you think Hunter ended up with the Burisma job? With experience on a gas company board for $50,000, $60,000 a month? No. He had no experience in the gas industry at that point. Why are people simply accepting the narrative being sold by paid shills for big corporations at face value? When the U.S. government lied to us about everything in Iraq, they lied about everything in Afghanistan, and all of that's come out long after the damage was done. The Afghanistan papers were devastating about the fact that there was no mission for years, and they just continued it mostly to benefit the defense contractors and keep the military getting their $700 billion a year. Why would anybody be encouraging this? We certainly are not. So, anyone who thinks the United States' involvement in this war is for noble or humanitarian reasons is naive, to put it nicely. Biden so far has killed 13,000 babies in Afghanistan with crushing sanctions, and he's continuing to fuel Saudi Arabia's genocidal war in Yemen. Okay, it's clear the U.S. intentions are to drag this war out as long as possible to weaken Russia's army. And as journalist Jonathan Cook said in a piece from InPress News, that the U.S., by contrast, wants a long proxy war of attrition, covertly supplying Ukrainian forces, indifferent as to whether they're nice ones or neo-Nazis, to bog Russia down in years of a difficult guerrilla warfare and counterinsurgency. Okay, that's actually very similar to what happened in 1980 with Afghanistan initially, when we funded the Taliban to begin with and gave money to Osama bin Laden. Yes, we did that in the 1980s. Okay.
Yes, that we did.
So what we wanted, what they're talking about is drawing Russia into a long local proxy war, spending money, resources, time, diverting away, and weakening Russia's position globally. So this strategy was detailed by Ned Price, who said that he was against Zelensky's openness to a diplomatic situation because the war was bigger than Ukraine. And as the U.S. is clearly pursuing a proxy war over a diplomatic solution, okay, as Dave DeCamp of Anti-War put it, that instead of pushing him to declare neutrality, the U.S. continues to arm Ukraine. Why? Okay, we know that they're going to get crushed. We cannot supply them with enough weapons, and unless we get involved ourselves personally, they cannot possibly defeat the Russians. They don't have the military, they don't have the people, they don't have the equipment, they don't have the technology. Okay,
they aren't doing too bad so far.
That it depends on who you ask. So, when asked if the U.S. is counseling Zelensky on negotiations, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Monday that they're in touch with Ukrainian officials every day, except that she also said that we're going to effectively send more weapons into the war zone. Not that we're brokering a peace process. We're not even having discussions of peace at all, and Blinken confirmed that on Tuesday. So
we know Putin doesn't want peace, though. We know he wants all of the land, that was the Soviet Union. He wants all of that.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily what he wants, but he definitely declared that region, the Donbass region, as an independent nation a week before he did this invasion, and basically warned Ukrainians and said, look, if you can stop this shelling and you can stop this from happening, but if you don't stop, attacking this region, we're going to go in and we're going to stop you from stopping them. And that's a lot of the argument that's happening here, on top of the fact that NATO has continued to expand eastward, etc. And does he want to rebuild the Russian Empire? I don't know. What he wants is NATO to not be involved with Ukraine, and for Ukraine to be at least a neutral zone, if not rebuilding. And I don't think he's looking to take over all of Ukraine. He wanted to have Donetsk. He wanted to have Luhansk. Okay, and not even have. They are mostly Russian area that wanted to be part of Russia, though they are Ukrainian right now. Okay, and just like with Crimea in 2014, when they annexed Crimea, there were people in Crimea that were fighting to be part of Russia. Okay, and again, there's people saying that he funded the separatist movement and caused that unrest, just like we cause unrest everywhere else around the world. I'm not saying this guy's benevolent, and nobody's ever said that he was. What we're saying is that we've caused a lot of the problems to force his hand to the point where he had to do something. So when we attempted a coup in Venezuela, Russia sent hundreds of troops to stop the overthrow of Maduro. And by stretching this war out as long as possible, by flooding Ukraine with weapons and crushing Russia's economy with sanctions, the U.S. sees an opportunity to take out an obstacle to its regime change goals. Because that's exactly what happened, okay? It's the same thing with Syria. We're trying to do one thing, Russia's trying to do the exact opposite and make sure that we're not undermining a democratically elected government that isn't friendly to the United States, which we have done repeatedly all over the world. Okay, and here's something that I wrote, because some of this stuff was written by the Dissident. This was word for word in the DMs. The sad truth is that it breaks down to a lot more nuance than just one side bad. All sides have gone wrong. It's about what we do now that we live in now, so that we live in peace, so that everybody moves forward equitably, so that the United States is not threatening Russia with all of our bases everywhere outside their country. What Russia does not have is bases surrounding the United States, but we have bases surrounding their country. What was that? Was that Reef or was that you? Okay, no, that was you. That's not even to make mention, like I said, of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline between Russia and Germany that was about to go operational, that we were desperate to stop as a country, nobody else. And we actually are benefiting now because the cutoff of Russian gas and that was going to be sold into Europe, we're now starting to pick up the slack and sell that to Europe at a much higher price, by the way. But now our oil, our gas companies, our LNG companies are actually selling more. So it's costing Europe more money to not buy from Russia. Okay. Or, for example, the expansion of NATO to add 14 countries east of Germany in the past 3 decades, when we committed back to Gorbachev that we would not expand 1 inch east of Germany. But we've continued to do it, and we continue to push the bear and poke the bear and poke the bear. And what do you think? What do you know? The bear roared. All right. So
we did.
Multiple stories.
We really
videos.
did.
Yeah, we really did. Okay, multiple stories and videos initially coming from Ukraine that were debunked as old footage, and that was another article that I wrote and that we covered here, where they were showing photos of kids saluting tanks, and they were trying to engender all kinds of sentiment. And it turns out those were from 2019, 2016. Zelensky in a bunker with all the gear on was from when he did a checkpoint stop in 2021. Had nothing to do with this war, but they were selling as if he was sitting on the front lines hanging out with soldiers. Not true. And they were selling a narrative, and they're still selling a narrative. And it's the same narrative that they sold as Andrew Cuomo 2 years ago. The sexy guy.
See, I didn't know that. That I did not know.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
About Zelensky. I didn't know that.
Oh, there's a ton about Zelensky and the fact that he actually he's an actor in the country who played the role of the president in a TV show in Ukraine that and then 4 years later ran for president and won. That's Zelensky's story. That's how he ended up as their president to begin with.
At least he hadn't dipped out like Afghanistan's president did. In the middle of the night.
There were actually questions of whether he did skip out and go to Poland, but he's still there apparently, and he's still meeting with Putin, and he's still trying to negotiate something, although he's not really empowered to negotiate anything. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
I said there's questionable narrative story being put around Brett Renaud's death at a Ukrainian checkpoint, and we covered that last week in How Do We Miss That? All right, in the dossier. Yeah. And again, he's talking about how he was tragically killed. All right, and immediately the story and the narrative coming from all corporate media was he was killed by the Russians. He was killed by some kind of missile fire, and they definitely did it. Right down to denouncement from Boris Johnson within 1 hour of it being announced. And the whole thing to me sounded like a cover story was being put up. And sure enough, they talked to the guy who's in the car with him, and it came from gunfire. It didn't even come from a missile. And turns out there were no Russians in the area. It was an area that was controlled by Ukrainians, and it happened near a Ukrainian checkpoint controlled by Ukrainians. Who killed this guy? It wasn't the Russians. And that's what this article is saying. And again, where are you going to hear that on mainstream media? Nowhere, because they want you to believe Russians bad. And that's what this whole thing is saying. We are not pro-Putin. We are not pro any of the... Look, Putin's an oligarch. He's a billionaire also, and he's a spy.
He's a freaking gangster.
He's a spy and a gangster, correct? Like, he's not a good dude. I never thought and purported that he was a good dude. No world leaders are. And again, the other thing that bothers the hell out of me is for 30 years, this guy's been around. But all of a sudden, in the last 2 years, in the last year, in the last couple of months, now he's Hitler. He hasn't... It's the narrative around this. It's universal, and if you don't believe it, then you're off the island and you're canceled with most of society, and it's really scary. Noli's here. Hi, Noli. Welcome. Okay, so like I said, so recently there's been a dangerous escalation that suggests that NATO may become militarily involved if Russia uses chemical weapons, but they set that up as a false flag. They said, well, if there's chemical weapons, then it's got to be Russia. All right, sounds just like Syria. Biden recently...
Yeah, I was just going to say, sounds familiar.
right? Biden recently said that they would respond if Russia uses chemical weapons in Ukraine. This is reminiscent of Obama's famous red line comments when he said that they would militarily intervene in Syria if chemical weapons were used. And then we saw 2018. Okay, again, Charles Glass of Harper's Magazine said it was an invitation for a false flag. And sure enough, 3 days ago, they're talking about chemical weapons, white phosphorus. We're starting to see it here now, and it's, yeah, right. Okay, and that's exactly what happened. Again, like I said, most notably in Duma, where Trump bombed Syria after an allegation of a chemical attack. And later, the whistleblowers within the chemical weapons watchdog, the OPCW, released a censor report to WikiLeaks that suggested that the attack was a false flag. Okay. Leaked documents even included an engineering report that suggested the alleged chlorine cylinders were manually placed, pointing to staging. This is in the assessment by Ian Henderson. So Biden is invoking an invitation.
How are we supposed to know what's real and what's not?
That's what they want.
At this point.
They don't want you to know. And whatever they tell you is real. That's what they want you to think. And don't question it.
But it's a real question for everyone watching. If y'all have an answer, please, help me out, because...
Right? So, yeah, Tyrant Slayer Studios is saying that the intelligence agencies lied to Trump before that bombing. Okay, Noli, welcome to the chat. Also, Valerie's in here. Frankie Lee. Who else have we got in here? We've got E. Heller, Bacon. The Mad Crab is still hanging out. So we've got about 15 people watching. Plus, we got 4 on the Rockfin. Hello, welcome to Rockfin. Thank you. And welcome to How Did We Miss That? This is a news show where we cover some articles. And actually, I wrote this one, co-wrote this with our IndieNews.Network teammate, The Dissident. Everybody go and check out IndieNews.Network.substack.com. You can sign up. And all the Indie News Network members have access to be able to publish, to write, and to upload their videos and their podcasts to this platform. And they usually have their own Substack, as do we, as does The Dissident, as does Tara Reid, our sister in INN. Support Tara Reid and go to her Patreon for sure. Patreon.com/Tara Reid. Throw a couple of bucks if you can. She could really use it, and she could use the love and support. And we love and support her a ton. She's going to be doing live streams on Rockfin, by the way, and all other platforms starting on Tuesday. She's going to be doing a regular weekly Tuesday show we're going to be helping her out with. And that will be co-streamed to Indie News Network, which we're really excited for.
My honest belief is that I don't care who maybe created the situation or whatever. The situation right now is that Ukraine is trying to defend itself against an invasion. And more power to them. I mean, that's just my view on it. As far as, right now, people are dying.
Yeah, we put them right in the middle of this thing, and they're essentially standing in front of bullets for us because we don't want to, and we don't want to get into a full-out war with Russia. And that's what's bothering me and what's disgraceful to me about this whole thing.
It is. It's sad. But one thing I'm worried about is all this coverage about Ukraine. I'm beginning to wonder what we're being distracted from.
Well, we're being distracted from what's happening in Israel-Palestine. We're being distracted from a war in Yemen. We're being distracted from all the operations that our military is doing in Somalia. We're being distracted from
whatever's going on in Congress.
Right, absolutely, yes, from the corruption in Congress, and distracted from all the different unionization efforts that are happening, and trying to basically control narratives and then set what the parameters of what's acceptable conversation.